Hey everybody, it's Cam from the Nerd Book Review, where I strive to broaden your fantasy horizons. Today I'm going to talk about The 13th Hour, the first book in the Cruel God series by Trudie Skies. I don't normally in these video reviews read the book blurb, but I'm going to do that today. I think it's going to help me out. Plus, it's going to give me a chance to show off some of the beautiful art that Trudie has for the book while I read the blurb. Cruel gods rule the steam-powered city of Chime, demanding worship and tribute from their mortal subjects. Kale lost her faith in them long ago, and now seeks to protect vulnerable and downtrodden mortals from their gods' whims. But when Kale discovers powers that she didn't know she had, and destroys a mortal soul by accident, she becomes Chime's most wanted. Quen's job was to pursue sinners until the vision started. Haunted by foreboding images of his beloved city's destruction, Quen hunts soul-sucking creatures made of ether who prey on its citizens, and Kale is his #1 target. To ensure Chime's future, Kale and Quen must discover the truth of Kale's divine abilities before the gods take matter into their own hands. For a city that bows to cruel gods, it'll take godless heathens to save it. The 13th Hour is the first book in the Cruel God series, a gaslamp fantasy featuring magical portals, gothic cosmic deities, quaint Britishisms, and steampunk vibes. It's an adult book containing strong language and mature themes that some readers may find disturbing. My quick take is, it is a tale about a small group who is fighting back against the cruel gods who created them and attempt to carve out a sanctuary in a steam-powered city. That book blurb introduces us to our two point-of-view characters that we have. Once again, two. They are going to be Kale and Quen. One of the biggest criticisms I often hear about modern fantasy is that authors today do not create a lot of new races. Maybe they're going to use the old races like dwarves or elves or something like that, but they're not coming up with their own. Trudie creates not one, not two, not three, but 13 different races. Each one of those races has their own deity. They all look incredibly different. I will discuss those real quick and show you guys a picture here a little bit into the review. But each of the 13 is unique and they are very, very different. If world building is your thing, then this book is amazing for the world building aspects. Right off the bat, I'm going to recommend that if you think this is going to be a book for you, I would read the guidebook that Trudie has on their website. I really wish that the guidebook had just been included in the book itself. The guidebook is like tongue-in-cheek and funny. Kale, that main character, she has her own notes within that guidebook discussing the city of Chime and the goings-on and what really happens during it. I found that once I read that, that satisfied that curiosity that I have, where I discuss that I can get sidetracked on trying to figure out what things look like. With 13 different races, that can be overwhelming a little bit at times. And I think actually one of the races, I wasn't even sure they were actually sentient the first time they're introduced. So the guidebook is absolutely helpful for someone like me who can get obsessed with a minor detail here and there. This review is going to have a lot of moving parts. I think that probably the best way to start it and to break it down is discuss both the city of Chime, where most of the story is going to take place, and discuss what the city of Chime is, how it relates to each of those 12 races that are primarily going to be spoken of during the book, and then like how Kale and Quentin fit in. He'll always be referred to as Quen. Once we break that down, then I think that'll help discuss the storyline a little bit. So the city of Chime is on its own world. There is a portal in the middle of the city. So once every 12 hours, that portal will open up to one of the other 12 worlds. Those other 12 worlds are ruled with an iron fist by the god of whichever race happens to be from the world that portal opens up to. They are all very, very different, and we'll talk about those 12 races later. But it's important to note that an awful lot of those gods are very cruel to the people. They require tithing. Sometimes people can't afford to pay the tithes, and oftentimes those gods treat people very, very poorly as a result. Chime then, therefore, is like the one city that those other 12 gods cannot set foot on, and so that the people that are in Chime, they're running things. A group called the Wardens, of which Quentin is one of. They are the ones that basically run the world. They kind of try to appease the other 12 gods and run the city in a way that's generally the least sinful as possible. They enforce moral codes and things like that. They act as police force as well. So what they're trying to do is just keep those gods away from Chime. Now, Kale, she is a part of a group called the Godless, and they don't worship any of those 12 gods. If you don't worship the god that created you and your race, because those gods, they know each of their mortals as long as you're praying to them, and they can even take you from Chime if you're praying to them. But if you don't pray to those gods and you are the godless, then the god can't find you when you're in Chime. Because those gods are often cruel, the godless will help out people who can't pay their tithes. Kale starts off the book as a Vesper. They're kind of like the lowest class. An important note is that Chime has a set of rules where all of the races are supposed to be equal. But from a practical manner, that's absolutely not the case. Kale is from the race called the Vesper at the beginning of the book. The Vesper are basically the absolute lowest class in in Chime. They live in the Undercity. So Chime has three parts to it. The top part of the city, which is up on the surface of the planet, it is really only 3 or 4 races that are generally allowed to live up there. The middle of the planet, where the portal is, where there's a big elevator that goes all the way down to the Undercity and then up as well to that upper part of the city. That is where kind of the middle class lives. And then in the Undercity is where the poor live, as well as one of the races called the Ember. I looked at them as fire demons, and their god says it's a sin not to sin. So basically, they run a section of the city where all of the gambling, prostitution, drugs, that kind of stuff happen. And while they're not necessarily beloved by the Wardens, they're tolerated, and it's also kind of a nice place where all of the sin is going to be kept isolated. And so the Wardens obviously allow that to happen since, well, the god of the Ember wants it to happen anyways. So the city feels absolutely alive and vibrant. It's kind of nice having something that's mostly set in one city when you're dealing with these urban fantasies, because it really helps the author be able to flesh out that city and really build things up. As the book blurb says at the beginning of the book, Kale is doing a secret mission for the Godless. They're obviously not tolerated very well by the Wardens, and she accidentally touches one of the people from another group. That person's power should have been working against her, and it didn't. Should have frozen her. Well, when she touches them, it steals their soul, and she ends up having to go on the run. Quentin is a warden. Quentin is a diviner. Most of the wardens are diviners. There are some others. There's some glimmers. They're all female. They're described as beautiful and golden. The diviners, I kind of thought of them more like clockwork style, brass looking. They're all male mostly. Glimmers are almost all female. And those two kind of create the groups that really run the wardens. Diviners are able to stop time, and they can even touch somebody and then go see what happened to them in their past, usually only about an hour or so before it starts having physical consequences and actually starts to break down their bodies. So people will try to make sure that if they think they're going to get caught by a diviner, that they're off doing something inane that's not a crime. Well, Quinn is sent to find Kale. He does. Instead of turning her in immediately, he wants to try to figure out what the mystery behind Kale is and why she's able to basically kill glimmers with a touch. And so that's going to set up the mystery adventure that follows. The story takes place over a relatively short period of time. Lots of action, and it really is an entertaining story. Quinn and Kale are great together. They'll actually work together for an awful lot of the book. They'll even have to go to some of those other worlds and see some of those other gods. And, we definitely get to see just how cruel one of those gods in particular is. And I think that Quinn, he starts off as a character who maybe we shouldn't like because he's trying to stop Kale, who we kind of are supposed to see as the heroine of the story. But Quinn quickly becomes a very likable character, very sympathetic. Kale, what I like about Kale is that she's impulsive, but she has like something else in her brain. She thinks it's just like her conscience or maybe her consciousness that helps get her out of problems. So she's going to make some stupid decisions, but her consciousness, that second thing in her brain, is going to help her out and stop her from making some of those stupid decisions, or maybe getting her out of trouble. I think that obviously when I talk about there being like 13 races, the absolute the greatest part of this has to be the world building. I am going to, real quick, we're going to try and make it no more than like 30 seconds per race so that this doesn't go on, but I'm going to describe the races and how they break down from being like the most powerful all the way down to that underclass. So as I've mentioned, the Glimmer already, they're all female, they're beautiful, they're golden. Then we have the Diviner. I thought of them as metallic looking. The image that you're going to be seeing doesn't show them as metallic looking, but that's how in my mind that kind of sound like clockwork. The Zephyr were really cool. They're like giant birds. Their god and their world is more technologically advanced than Chime. They're not really ruling necessarily, but they help the Glimmer and the Diviners create all of the mechanism and the technology that runs Chime. Amne, they're like an aquatic fish-like. They're humanoid still, but they have gills. They can breathe air as well, but they need like things to be really they need a lot of moisture in the air to be able to survive. They can actually touch someone and suck memories out and then take those memories for themselves. One way that some people will use them is to like wipe memories that they don't want found out. Leander were cool. They're they're like the enforcers of the Wardens. They're like humanoid lions. That's basically exactly how they're described, as humanoid lions. They're very strong and powerful, athletic. They're the enforcers. The Mesmer, their skin is actually made of starlight. They spend a lot of time sleeping. They're described as out of it an awful lot of the time. They can see prophecies and things like that in the future. Then there's the Fauna. Now, the Fauna is one that threw me at first because I think the first time I encountered the Fauna, I didn't realize they were sentient. I thought they were just animals. Well, they are a race that can shapeshift into any animal. I don't actually quite know where they fit into society. There are some that are mentioned as being part of the Wardens, and they'll like turn into dogs and be guard dogs. They can sniff things out and stuff like that. But otherwise, they're probably the least discussed in this book. Then we have the Ember, who are super cool. Like I said, I kind of saw them as like big red fire demons. They can shoot fireballs. Their god wants them to sin, so they're going to be the ones that are running the Vice Den and do a lot of sinning in the book. The Saren, they are tiny, childlike. I thought of the Saren as like tiny cherubs. You obviously get sirens from there. They are the only race that aren't allowed to use their powers within the city of Chime because their singing can mesmerize people and they can make people do what they tell them to do. Then there's the Necro. Think vampires. Their power is they can both heal people, they can sculpt them to look differently, but using their power makes them desire to eat flesh and drink blood. So they're very useful in society, but an awful lot of people get a real ick factor and are creeped out by them. So they serve as like doctors and things like that, and obviously as plastic surgeons. They're tolerated but not well liked. Now we have the two races that are like kind of like the lower rungs of society. First, you have the Umber. They actually are made of stone. They have like vines and leaves and things like that for their hair. Their god is called the kindest of the gods, but their god requires a lot of hard work, so it's actually a sin to slack off. So they're going to be the workhorse workforce of Chime. But generally they're peaceful, but they can also be very strong and powerful as well. Then you have the lowest rung of society. They're called Vesper. They're often like dark skinned blue or black, and their hair seems to be made of vines. They can manipulate shadow, so they can like actually hide in shadows. Their god is the cruelest of the 12 gods, and we actually get to see, we will step foot in this book in the Vesper world and see just how awful their god is. I kind of saw her as like one of the Indian, like Kali or something, with like a bunch of arms um, and um, and fangs, and just definitely not a god that you would want to encounter if possible. So just to wrap things up real quick, we have the 12 races. You have one city, Chime. Chime is basically built around that portal. It's like a steampunk city. As I mentioned, we have the surface where only the higher class people get to live. We have the middle, which is like a middle class area, and it's where the portal is, and also that elevator that goes up to the surface and down to the undercity. And then you have the undercity, that is where the lower class and the poor live, as well as where like the sitting den goes. City felt absolutely vibrant and alive, and it was one of the better made steampunk cities that I've ever read about. Then there's those 12 races. Recommend the guidebook as well. Getting into my review side of this, for someone who's a world building fan like me, this book was pretty awesome. But I also had that like one big issue that I mentioned, same thing with the Gods of the Weirdwood, that it took me like 25% probably. And I actually then emailed Trudie, and they gave me that guidebook, which is available for free on their website. And I wish that guidebook had been in that first book, because it really was a little bit difficult for me to not be sidetracked. I just kept on reading all this extra stuff. And once I read that guidebook, which, like I said, was fun to read in itself, it's a guidebook to the city of Chime, but it's got like a lot of like funny, notes that Kale has added in. And I really enjoyed reading that. And then once I read that and was able to like see pictures of what they look like, so sometimes early on I had some issues like figuring out like which portal and god they were talking about, like correlating to which race. Once I had that down, then the book was just a breeze to go through, and I absolutely enjoyed it. So like I said, this book is action packed. It takes place over a fairly short period of time. This really is an adventure novel, and you know what? If you are a world building fan, I really almost feel like that you have to want to read this book. It is definitely an adult novel. There is absolutely a sexual assault. It deals with a lot of adult themes. There is some, a lot of people end up dead. And, they're going to spend some time in like a den of ice at one point. And while it's not like super graphic, you're going to hear about things that are happening, drug use, all that kind of stuff. So I absolutely would not recommend this as a YA book in any way, shape, or form. Getting into my actual rating, you know what? I feel like this is a book that, had I read the guidebook or had the guidebook with it, it could have been that 5 out of 5 for me. But because I spent that initial first part of the book trying to figure out what's going on and getting like sidetracked and here and there, I'm going to give this one a 4.25. Let's say that, right? We're not quite that 9 out of 10 if we were going to break it into the full 10, but definitely a book that I plan on reading more books in the series. The world building is, you get 13 new races. If that's a complaint you've ever had before, that no one creates new races, then this one's for you. The interactions between Kale and Quen were great. Dialogue is great between characters. Their interactions are great, and the prose is very beautiful as well. It's a story that I enjoyed reading. I got into that movie in my mind once I finally got into that movie in my mind, and I stayed there. And the way things are described, I really felt like I was in that movie in my mind, and like really seeing what these what the races look like and what the city look like. It is beautifully described. The city, each of the three parts is very distinct, and we get plenty of description of that. There is not really like a big lull anywhere in the book either. So if you like that adventure story, a lot happens, and it happens in a pretty short period of time. So this is a book that I would recommend to anyone who likes an adult adventure novel. Like I said, I'm going to give it about a 4.25. I think this is a series, though, as I carry on, that could absolutely be a 5 out of 5 series for me. At some point, I plan on creating like a world building all star episode, and I can assure you the Cruel God series is going to make an appearance in that. If you enjoy my videos, please like and subscribe. Obviously, to keep building this channel, I need people who enjoy watching these videos to like and subscribe. So if you could do that, I'd appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful day and good reading. Thank you.